The House Republican Policy Committee will come to order. Representative Schlegel, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Here's the flag. To the right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here today. My name is David Rowe. I have the privilege of serving as the House Republican Policy Committee Chairman. I also serve the 85th Legislative District as State Representative, which covers Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin counties. I want to start today by thanking the YWCA of Hanover for hosting us today, for the important work you do every day to support children, families, and working parents in our communities. We're going to start off with member introductions, starting with the host, Representative Klunk, Chair of the Children and Youth Committee, who I just want to say as an aside has truly been a foremost leader on this issue. Her leadership has not just elevated the awareness of the issue across the Commonwealth, but really moved the needle for the people of Pennsylvania. So we're going to start off with member introductions, and then we're going to kick it over for some opening remarks.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Kate Klunk. Welcome to the 169th District here in Hanover. It's an honor to represent you all.
I'm Representative Mark Anderson. I represent the 92nd District, Northern York County.
Good morning. Brenda Pugh from the 120th District down in Luzerne County.
Wendy Fink from District 94, which is in Southern York County.
State Rep Dan Mao, 91st District. Actually, I live about a mile and a half from here. Kate Klunk's the only one that had a shorter drive than I did this morning.
Hi, Barb Gleim from the 199th District in Northwest Cumberland County.
Good morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, consisting of all of beautiful Columbia County.
Representative Michael Stender, the 108th District, which is Northumberland and Montour counties.
Good morning, everybody. Scott Barger, State Representative in the 80th District, which is primarily Blair and a part of Huntington County, just about 2.5 hours from here.
Good morning. I'm State Representative John Schlegel, representing the 101st District in the heart of Lebanon County.
Good morning, Joe Diorsi. I represent the 47th District in Eastern York County.
I also want to mention we are joined online by Representative Valerie Gatos. Representative Gatos, thank you very much for being with us today. I also want to recognize that we are joined by Logan Wolf, who is a representative from Congressman Lloyd Smucker's office. Thank you, Logan, very much for being with us today. So why we are here is because one of the most pressing affordability challenges facing Pennsylvanians is childcare. Across the Commonwealth, parents are struggling to find care they can afford and that they can rely on. At the same time, providers are facing workforce shortages, rising costs, and navigating regulatory barriers that make it harder to operate and grow. And unfortunately, that disconnect just is not sustainable. When child care falls through, parents miss work, businesses lose productivity, and families feel the strain. So today we're here to listen, and we're here to focus on practical, common-sense solutions that lower cost, expand access, and supports providers. Because at the end of the day, affordability starts here, and it starts with making sure families can access the child care they need to live, work, and succeed here in Pennsylvania. And with that, I'd like to turn over to Chairwoman Klunk for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the YWCA for having us here today. This place is near and dear to my heart because this is where my parents decided to place me as a child, in stay and play, daycare upstairs, as well as my preschool here at the YWCA. So thank you so very much. Without those formative years here, I don't know if I would be the state representative that I am today. So thank you so very much for that. We are continuing to have these hearings on this very important topic of childcare for our children. Making childcare affordable in our state is going to take more than just a retention and a recruitment bonus program. And I want to thank everyone for coming out here today to share your stories and your information. One consistent theme that we have heard throughout these hearings is that it's difficult for our providers to have positive interactions with our DHS inspectors and the inconsistent application of the multitude of regulations that we have on the books. And it's a little disappointing to hear that the system has become so punitive to our providers who are taking care of our most precious resource, our children. You all have shown how invested and committed you are for caring for our children, and our state's working parents need that peace of mind when they drop off their children, that their children, their most precious resource, is going to be in good hands. But we all know behind the scenes, many of you operate in a state of fear because of these violations and these citations. And really, it seems like DHS has created a system that punishes our providers rather than helping them and holding their hand along the way. And I just cannot understand this model of operation. I know that there are some really great inspectors out there. I've heard those stories. And I don't want to minimize that. But overall, we need change here in Pennsylvania, and that happens at the top down. So I am very much looking forward to your comments here today on how we can hopefully change the narrative here and hopefully then move forward with conversations with DHS in how we can transform these regulations and hopefully transform a system into something that is positive, not only for our providers, but our children and our families. Thank you so very much, and I'll hand it back to the chair.
Thank you, Chairwoman Klunk. I want to mention that we have been joined by Chairman of the Local Government Committee, Representative Brett Miller, serving the 41st Legislative District in Lancaster County. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we move on to our testifiers, I first of all want to kick things over to the CEO of YWCA Hanover, Vanessa Berger, for some remarks. Thank you for having us here today. We're grateful to be here.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of YWCA Hanover, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you. We are honored to host today's House Republican Policy Committee hearing on making childcare more affordable and accessible for families across Pennsylvania. I'd especially like to thank Representative Kate Klunk and the members of the committee for being here and for your leadership on this important issue. At YWCA Hanover, we see every day how essential childcare is, not just for children's development, but for working parents, employers, and the strength of our local economy. And the challenges are very real, both here in York County and across the Commonwealth. Since 2020, more than 20% of childcare providers in York County have closed, leaving fewer options for families and long wait lists for those seeking care. In fact, many early learning centers report wait lists of 50 to 75 children, reflecting just how limited availability has become. Across Pennsylvania, the picture is just as concerning. The average cost of infant care is around $13,000 per year, often consuming 30 to 50% of a family's income, far above what is considered affordable. And due to workforce shortages, there are currently about 3,000 unfilled child care positions statewide, meaning thousands of children cannot access care even when families are ready and able to pay for it. We also know this is just not a family issue, it's an economic one. In Pennsylvania, 81% of employers report challenges recruiting and retaining workers due to child care issues. These numbers reflect what we see every day at YWCA Hanover: families making impossible choices, educators stretched thin, and employers struggling to build a reliable workforce. And yet, we also see the opportunity. When we invest in childcare, we invest in children's futures, in working families, and in the economic vitality of communities like ours. That's why today's hearing is so important. We are proud to be part of the solution, providing early childhood education and support for families, and we are grateful for the opportunity to share our experiences and learn from others. We hope today's conversation leads to thoughtful, practical solutions that expand access, support the workforce, and make childcare more affordable for all Pennsylvania families. Thank you again for being here, for your partnership, and for your commitment to this critical issue. Welcome to YWCA Hanover. We look forward to a meaningful and productive session.
Thank you very much for having us today. It's wonderful to be here. I know it probably wasn't picked up on the mic earlier, but we had the sounds of lots of children outside of the door, which is exactly why we're here. It's exciting to hear that they have a place here, a safe place to come, and you guys provide that opportunity for parents to have this. So thank you very much for having us. It's wonderful to be here. We have two panels today. We have quite the lineup, which I'm very excited for today. I'm going to have our first panel come up and introduce them. We have Sarah Bradley. She is the Executive Director of York Day Early Learning. We have Jessica Schertzer. She is the Director of the Nature and Nurture Discovery School. We have Laura Walker. She is the Director of Caterpillar Lane Preschool. And we have Justin Gaston, who is the Regional Vice President of the York County Hanover Area YMCA. I want to thank you all very much for being here. We're going to start things off with testimony from you guys. 3 to 5 minutes each would be great. And then we're going to turn it over to members for questions. When we get to questions, you're welcome to jump in on any question you want. Members might ask you a question directly, or they might ask the panel at large. We are here to learn from you, so you're welcome to answer every question, but you're not obligated to answer any question. So we're going to start things off. Sarah, you're first.
Yes, happy to. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Sarah Bradley, and I'm the Executive Director at York Day Early Learning, a nonprofit organization that has been serving children and families in York County since 1932. For nearly a century, we've supported generations of families by providing high-quality early learning services. We are a trusted, community-rooted institution focused not only on early education, but also on the whole family supports. Our mission is to be the program of choice for working families in York County, and the unspoken part of that mission is that we strive to do this regardless of the family's ability to pay. In many cases, we are the village. What makes York Day unique is not just our longevity, but our intentional approach to care. We go beyond minimum standards. In fact, we actively work to raise the quality bar by innovating wherever possible. One example is maintaining staffing levels at nearly double state ratios, because we know young children need individualized attention and strong, consistent relationships. We've integrated a permanent therapy dog into our program to support both children and staff with emotional regulation, especially those experiencing high-level stress or trauma. Most recently, we launched our Twilight Care program, offering extended and overnight care to support working parents working non-traditional schedules. These are essential members of our community, healthcare workers, service employees, and others whose lives don't fit into a traditional 9-to-5 model. Our very first family drives from Hershey to York for overnight care. But even as we innovate and expand, the demand far exceeds our capacity. Today, York Day Early Learning has a waiting list of over 600 children. And here is the reality we confront. Our model works because of strong public and private partnerships, not because tuition alone can sustain it. If York Day relied solely on tuition, we would face a gap of more than $620,000 annually. To close that gap, tuition for a child aged 3 to 5 would need to increase from an average of our $265 a week to approximately $450 a week, just to make the bottom line work. For many of our families we serve, and many more on our waiting list, this cost is simply out of reach. In addition to relying heavily on partnerships to cover the true cost of high-quality care, we face regulatory challenges that can have significant consequences, even when programs act responsibly and proactively. I want to be very clear. Early learning must be well-regulated. The responsibility of caring for our most vulnerable residents should never be taken lightly, and must remain a priority within the Commonwealth. We have always had a positive and collaborative relationship with our oversight agencies at both the state and highest national level. Our inspectors have been professional, supportive, and responsive. We do view them as partners and regularly consult with them to ensure our innovations align with the rigorous policy regulations in Pennsylvania. Here is an example. In 2022, York Day Early Learning self-reported a lapse in supervision. A child was unsupervised for 1 minute and 45 seconds. Before the Department of Human Services entered our building, we had already taken immediate and decisive action. The staff involved were terminated, hourly supervision checks were implemented, and all staff in the affected classroom received additional training. We take ethical self-reporting seriously. It is not just a requirement. It reflects our commitment to accountability and high-quality care. However, even though we have already implemented all required corrective actions, the provisional status triggered additional consequences. The entire center was required to be paid in-person training, creating additional operational cost. Everyone, regardless of the situation, was required to have $150 worth of training. More significantly, many of our public funding partnerships require DHS certification and good standing. Because we were placed on provisional status, York Day Early Learning lost approximately $102,000 in operational revenue over those 6 months due to withheld state-funded contracts. This creates a difficult tension in the system. I just mentioned $102,000 today. That could be up to $377,000 for us if we were to go on a provisional license. Creates a difficult tension in the system. Programs are expected and required to self-report, but the financial consequences can be substantial, even when programs respond quickly, transparently, and responsibly. Withholding operational funding due to a temporary regulation violation directly affects our ability to sustain well-paid teachers and maintain the high-quality care families depend on. Regulatory oversight should be consistent, objective, and practical, and should not create unnecessary redundancies. For example, in Pennsylvania, if we take our 20-kid summer camp to the pool, we are required to double our staffing ratios and bring our own certified lifeguard, even when the facility meets all supervision and regulatory requirements already. Requirements like these add cost without always improving safety outcomes. We did summer camp for the first time last summer. We will not be swimming again. We lose money to take kids swimming. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I have been working in and advocating for early learning since 2005. And hearings like this demonstrate that our Commonwealth is paying attention. I appreciate your time, your leadership, and your commitment to early childhood education. If we truly believe in supporting working families, we must be strengthening our work and strengthening the workforce. We must treat childcare not as a luxury, but as an essential infrastructure and appropriate funding that makes it affordable for working families. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bradley. Director Schertzer.
So just to clarify, I am not the director of Nature and Nurture Discovery School. I was the prior owner. My background quickly is my mom was a family home child care provider who then moved to a group home provider growing up. I then had my own center for 12 years, sold it, went to go work for DHS as a child care inspector. Did that for several years, not my cup of tea. Came back out and I owned 3 large facilities, one in York County, which I will say is York County Day School is probably our only other competitor that I wouldn't even call us a competitor, but the next that's on our level of our Webster Early Learning Center, which was my other child care center. And then I had 2 in in Dauphin County. One was Nature and Nurture and one is Lingelstown Early Learning Center. Of all of my centers, they have always been Star 3, Star 4 facilities. However, I will gladly state that my first center was the first privately owned Star 4 center in Dauphin County when the STARS program came out, and by far I will rate that one as the highest quality of that I've had. Unfortunately, I will say that the STARS program has not had a positive impact on child care providers. It has just added more hoops to jump through, which have made it harder to actually provide the quality child care that we need. Listening to Sarah's testimony, there's so much to talk about. There's so many things that are great in childcare, and there's so many things that are just not working. I believe the first person who spoke had said that childcare costs approximately $12,000. That might be in this county, but I just ran my numbers while I was sitting here. Infant care runs approximately $20,000 in Dauphin County. Infant, okay? Preschool runs $15,000. Now, anyone who's ever run a business that knows is there's gives and takes. Running $20,000 is still taking a loss on every infant and toddler. There is no way. The only way that we actually can pay our bills is because we're still charging $15,000 for preschool. In my York facility that I operated, we operated pre-K counts. So I'm very familiar with the budget, and I know that Pennsylvania is very happy in seeing that program as a success. But I will tell you, the reason that program looks like a success is because it is only looking at preschool by itself. Yes, there is money to spend, and we can hire fantastic teachers at a higher rate, but that's because it's only taking into account preschool. It's not taking into account that those funds for preschool actually are subsidizing infant and toddler care. So in that little microscope of just looking at pre-K counts, it looks like a success financially, but it is not. Okay, you cannot run a pre-K counts based solely by itself. It will not sustain itself, which is why the intent was to always run within a child care center, because it needs the supports that are provided by the other staff and other supports that are there. The financial aspects, whenever someone tries to be honest with DHS and, you know, report a supervision issue of a minute, they were put on provisional for 6 months. That is the standard policy. However, I will admit DHS ebbs and flows with that policy depending on which center it is. The max is 6 months. I've seen it take a month for certain providers who knew who to call. Not that the supervision was any less important. I've seen it happen on people who have had multiple supervision lapses, and they got a month. Also, they wouldn't lose their funding because the funding is so important. Not only do you go on provisional, which I'm not saying isn't needed, but there's actions that someone could take. Some people are super proactive, like Sarah, and I've experienced it too within my facility. And I knew the drill. It's training. And here's the thing. The people are going to get fired or they're going to leave. So the people who did the wrong aren't even there to take the training, to see how it hurt the center or anything. So we're really just punishing the center and the staff who did nothing wrong in the first place. Do I think policies need to be put in place after a lapse of supervision? Absolutely. Let's prevent it from ever happening again. But when you put a center on provisional, their STARS goes on pause, which means they lose the subsidy rate that they're currently making. So now the state has just dropped the funding that they're making. If you're a nonprofit like Sarah's, you might lose out on funding from other streams. If you were a pre-K counts facility, guess what gets held up? If you are on food program, they get notified. All of these things come into play. My Nature and Nurture holds a PDE license for licensed kindergarten, so I deal with that license also. There is a trickle-down effect of going on provisional, and DHS is very well aware of it. But who are you helping? If anything, those facilities that have those lapses in supervision need more assistance. They need training. They need new in staff because we're going to terminate the ones who lacked supervision. But taking funds, you're just kicking someone when they're already down. It doesn't really help. I will also say, I don't know the particular situation at Sarah Center, but my particular situation, I had a child that hid, a school-age child. They're school-age children. No offense, but I played hide and go seek all the time as a child. We're not allowed to do that in childcare. Okay, we don't play hide and go seek at all anymore because it's not allowed. We are expected to be able to see, hear, direct, and assess children at all times. What happens when they go to the bathroom? Are we supposed to give children privacy, or are we supposed to stand there and watch them? Depends on who you ask. Some reps will say you have to stand there and watch them go to the bathroom. For a toddler, sure, I will give that to you all day. We're potty training. I would like to help you, to help myself so I don't have a mess
A
to clean
simple
up.
photo of the paper in front of you will be fine.
We good? But when they hit preschool, do they not deserve some level of privacy? Okay, they're learning. They have to learn. When they go to public school, obviously they're going into a bathroom by themselves. No teacher is walking them to the bathroom. We run into this with school-age programs who operate before and after school care programs in the same school the children have been in for 8 hours. During those 8 hours, they're allowed to go to the bathroom freely and come back to class. No supervision needed. But the minute it becomes a DHS, they're now no longer allowed to go to the bathroom by themselves. Staff has to stand at the door and make sure, God forbid, they don't do whatever they do in the bathroom. And they can't even play on the play equipment, which is a whole nother issue. So it's okay during 8 hours while PDE is oversight, but it's not okay when DHS is there. I was mentioning to Laura earlier, because I have dealt with Department of Education for licensing for kindergarten and versus DHS, PD, which is funded completely through taxpayer money, you would assume would be more regulated. And I think the general consensus of the public is that they think that that would be more regulated. It's not. It's about a quarter the size of our regulations in DHS. We have one regulation for the temperature of our classroom in PDE. We have 8 in DHS. Just the temperature of the classroom. That's insane. It doesn't give us any credit, I think, or trust that we can't figure out what is a comfortable temperature for children. There's a lot of inconsistencies, and I don't want to put this on inspectors. Let me be very clear. I feel like providers are doing the best that they can do with the situation that they're given. I feel the same about inspectors. For being on both sides, and I will probably get heat for saying this, but they are literally the minions of DHS. They are told what to do, how to do it, without much input, whether regardless of their degree, and it changes weekly. A lot of times as inspectors, they don't even know that a regulation clarification was made until we get a call from a provider saying, how do I imply this? How do I do this? They don't know because they didn't even know it was coming out. Their input wasn't asked as inspectors. Hey, what are you seeing in the field? How will this work for the centers that you're overseeing? They have no insight in that. They are doing the best they can do with the tools that they are being given. Inspectors themselves are not given training. They get one training a year and it's Ocdel decides, hey, we're gonna learn about customer service this year. Maybe I don't need customer service. Maybe I need to learn about early learning. So there's a lot of flaws in the system, and there needs to be a better way to do this, okay? DHS is now punitive. Since COVID, they've become extremely punitive. DHS is not there to help. I was specifically told as an inspector to stop helping because that was not my job. And I was making other reps look bad who could not do that. Maybe because they didn't have the background in childcare that I had. That's insane, and honestly, that was the third straw. That's why I left, because I can't, I'm not that type of person to be told not to help someone. The only other thing I'm gonna say is, we all know that there's a shortage in childcare slots. We all know that we're short-staffed. It's not going away. It was made worse since COVID. The retention grants are a joke. They're not helpful. And we actually used to get a bigger retention grant before COVID that staff could rely on, could earn, could work towards. We know that if you get this education, if you get an associate's degree, you could get $3,000 bonus every year. The staff could count on it. They had a goal. Now it's just like, oh, DHS came out with a $425 grant, which, by the way, was due to all providers 2 weeks ago and no one got them. But the legally binding agreement said they were going to have them 2 weeks ago. But we should be thankful because they're going to up it to $625. But I literally had providers on Friday get confirmation that it would be in their account in 2 days. And then Monday came and nothing. My other thing is we have lost so many providers. I know if you do the percentages, it looks like we increased providers. That's because we increased centers. Family homes, we have lost 62% of family home providers. That blows my mind. We have lost 23% of group home providers. We have a 5% increase on centers. Family homes, if I had to choose my children are teenagers now, if I had to choose childcare, thankfully I only ever had to do it for 1 year. I was able to always have them in the center that I owned. I would go family care all day long. It's smaller numbers, it's a family setting, it's comfortable. I'm sorry, children were never meant to sit in classrooms with 20 other children and fight for the attention of 2 adults. They're not getting quality care in that way. So the fact that we're losing these high quality centers should say something. And I will say they're not all just quitting, they're just going illegal. Because actually the laws for the unlicensed family home providers are easier than the regulation ones, so.
Well, thank you very much. That was a fantastic inside glimpse. And to your point about the 62 lost centers, 6 of them are in my region alone since last year. So it's a very real issue. Thank you. Director Walker.
Good morning, committee members. And thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the proposed child care regulatory rewrite. My name is Laura Walker, and I am here today proudly representing group home child care providers and the families that we serve in our great state of Pennsylvania. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology from the University of Maryland and a master's degree in early childhood education from Arizona State University, and I have worked as an in-home child care provider in York County for the past 12 years. I am here to demonstrate that the regulation rewrite, if passed as last provided, would result in abrupt structural changes, disenfranchisement for providers, administrative burden, lack of trust, harm to children, loss of privacy, and definitional ambiguity. Pennsylvania's child care system is currently facing measurable supply constraints, as we have just discussed. Family child care has been reduced by 62% in number. Family child care providers have gone from roughly 2,500 to just under 1,000, and group home child care providers from 800 to 600 in number. If we continue at this rate, we are going to see the extinction of home-based child care in the Commonwealth. Data shows that increases in staffing mandates, compliance costs, and administrative burden can contribute to provider exit and reduced market participation. We must ask why then we would pass sweeping regulatory reform that would catalyze these issues for the existing child care workforce. As policymakers consider modernization efforts, evaluating potential impacts on access to care is critically important, especially in working and rural class communities where home-based child care represents the primary licensed option. Meaningful regulatory reform depends on transparency and stakeholder involvement. Regarding this initiative, department communications have been historically sparse with short response windows. And despite meaningful outreach by providers, access to draft data has been blocked since October 2022. While a formal 30-day public comment period may be anticipated, this time frame is insufficient to analyze operational implications, disseminate information, mobilize a coordinated feedback. Collaboration should be driven from the ground up. Providers and families deserve to have their voices heard and to be represented. We need to see the drafts. Research consistently identifies the presence of a stable and responsive caregiver as one of the strongest protective factors influencing child outcomes, particularly for children exposed to adverse childhood experiences. Longitudinal and meta-analysis correlate the presence of a consistent and loving caregiver with greater academic success, educational attainment, better long-term health outcomes, including lower rates of cancer, stroke, diabetes, greater emotional resilience, lower incarceration rates. I could go on. The list is exhaustive. In the field of childcare, when a child stays with the same caregiver over a period of time, we call this continuity of care, and it is the hallmark of home-based childcare. The average length of time a child will spend with a home-based child care provider is 2 to 5 years compared to only 6 to 12 months in a center. As you may imagine, smaller group environments are associated with increased caregiver sensitivity and individualized development interaction, and reducing provider stress supports caregiver responsiveness and continuity of care. Therefore, the regulations must be written to encourage, support, and grow home-based childcare in the Commonwealth. We have an opportunity through this rewrite to serve as a model nationwide, one that protects and cultivates a diverse, responsive, consistent, and affordable childcare workforce. Balanced policy analysis must consider long-term developmental outcomes along short-term liability concerns. For example, the attached draft calls for the removal of class pets, the disallowance of experience-based learning incorporating live animals, grass as a play surface, dirt derived directly from the ground, and toxic plants such as tomatoes and potatoes in gardens. It further restricts children from outdoor play when temperatures exceed 89 degrees. While empirical data links the interaction with natural environments to improved immune functioning, visual development, attention regulation, psychological well-being, etc. We must also consider workforce and economic implications. Abrupt structural changes that require full-time staffing expansion, relocation into commercial facilities, or lower child ratios will create glass ceilings for working-class women who lack access to capital to scale their businesses outside of their homes. It's going to disproportionately affect those with fewer resources and the families and communities that they serve. It would take approximately 90 to 100% of the average home child care provider's net pay to retain one full-time staff member. Home-based childcare is the Commonwealth's most affordable form of childcare. Families typically pay between 5 and 20% less for home-based childcare, and the state reimburses via subsidy pays approximately 25 to 30% less per child for home-based care. Definitional shifts that reclassify residential programs as commercial institutions is a misnomer that will result in an unknown number of closures due to regionally variable zoning ordinance and hurdles to accessing insurance. The federal child care development and block grant regulations allow states the flexibility to establish operational subcategories for licensing purposes based on practical implementation needs. This suggests that larger home-based programs may be regulated within the family child care network. They do not need to be labeled as commercial institutions in a home. Strengthening Pennsylvania's child care system requires balancing safety goals with developmental science, workforce realities, and access considerations. Expanding transparency, supporting diverse delivery models, and carefully evaluating unintended consequences may help ensure regulatory reform ultimately improves the outcomes for children and the families that we serve. Without empirical data supporting improved child safety and quality of care, we cannot risk sending a shockwave through an already fragile infrastructure, risking further contraction or extinction of the home-based child care model in favor of a more institutionalized model. I urge the committee to remember the Department of Health and Safety serves to set basic health and safety standards. It is not tasked with the micromanagement of the private child care sector via extensive regulatory reform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Walker. Vice President Gaston.
Chairman Rowe and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the critical issue of access to childcare and the regulations that impact it. My name is Justin Gaston. I represent the Hanover Area YMCA and the State Alliance of YMCAs. Across the Commonwealth, YMCAs serve hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians each year through early learning, before and after school programs, and summer camps that working families rely on every day. At the Hanover Area YMCA, we operate a Star 4 Early Learning Academy and provide school-age care across 4 school districts. Despite this, we currently have wait lists. Families are trying to access care we simply cannot provide, especially for infants, where staffing and cost constraints make expansion extremely difficult. Childcare is not just a service, it's a cornerstone of our economy. When childcare is unavailable, parents cannot work, and when parents cannot work, businesses and communities feel the impact. One of the biggest barriers we face is staffing. Current regulations limit who we can hire. For example, requiring staff to be 18 excludes 16 and 17-year-olds who are eager and capable of working in supervised roles. We see a very practical opportunity here, especially in the summer. Many of our regular full-time staff take time off when their children are out of school. At the same time, 16 and 17-year-olds are available and looking for work. Allowing them to support programs in supervised roles during this period would help stabilize staffing, maintain ratios, and build a pipeline of future educators. We also face rigid experience and credential requirements. The current 2,500-hour requirements can take years to achieve in part-time programs, and valuable experiences like volunteering or youth coaching is often not recognized. More flexible pathways would help us grow and retain talent. In addition, school-age programs are often held to the same standards as full-day childcare centers, despite serving older, more independent children. States like North Carolina have addressed this by allowing school buildings already approved for use during the school day to be used for after-school programs without duplicative requirements. Adopting a similar approach in Pennsylvania would reduce barriers and improve efficiency. Administrative processes are another challenge. Today, families can complete major transactions like purchasing a home or sign medical forms digitally at a doctor's office. Yet enrolling a child in childcare still requires paper forms and wet signatures. Consolidating and modernizing these processes would reduce burden on families and providers and reflect how transactions are being handled in every other part of our lives today. We're not asking to reduce safety standards. Safety and quality are non-negotiable. We are asking for thoughtful, targeted reforms that reflect today's workforce and families. Specifically, we recommend allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to serve in supervised roles, modernizing qualification and experience pathways, aligning school-age regulations with K-12 standards, and reducing administrative burden through digital processes. With these changes, providers like the YMCA can expand access, reduce wait lists, and better support working families. Families are on wait lists today. Providers are turning children away today. We have an opportunity to act now. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Vice President Gaston. We're going to turn it over to member questions now. As I said earlier, members might ask you questions directly or as the group as a whole. Feel free to chime in. We do have a second panel to get to, and I'll make sure we have time for them as well. So we're going to do question and answer for about a half an hour, and we'll get through as many questions as we can in that time. But brevity is, of course, appreciated as always. Representative Schlegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to commend the panel. The substance that you shared today already and the passion with which you did so is very compelling. Very appreciative of you being here. I have to do a shout out for a child care provider in Lebanon County who was clear to remind me that May 8th is National Child Care Providers Day. So I wanted to recognize that I've received that information and certainly appreciate that, and will remember that. It'll be on my calendar. My question, though, to the panel, in light of the substance that you've provided, could you talk a little bit about, and it can come from all of you or any of you, what specific policy changes would allow providers to either lower cost or to at least expand capacity?
That's okay. I'm going to comment on this one only because we have a 600 child waiting list. There have been multiple times in New York Days history where we have tried to expand and immediately want to start at the high quality level we know we can provide. For us to be able to expand, we automatically, in pursuit of a new license, go on a 6-month provisional, which means we cannot access all of those additional state funds and contracts that we need to sustain, grow, and maintain high quality care. It has stopped us 2 times in the last 2 years of being able to expand and grow. So for me, I would say if we were to look at something, especially those centers that have proven they have, we are almost a century old. We have 100 years of experience, and we cannot expand quickly. It is a very slow and tedious process to be able to open a new center.
So to play devil's advocate, so the way that DHS works, and I agree with her, the way that DHS works is whenever there is a new facility or a large expansion, they're a new facility. There is no intention put, and that's how policy is written. It's a new center. Doesn't matter if the provider has been in existence for 100 years. So a policy that could be effectively changed is how DHS approaches already currently operating facilities. If they can expand quickly, and if they're star 4, they have a record of star 4 for how long? They know how to do it. They don't need to go through a training process and a 6-month waiting process. I will say that whenever a brand new facility opens, an inspector will come out and they only do verify approximately 20 of the regulations. So that is why a repeat visit is needed. Typically within a 6-month period, they are supposed to have 2 of those visits before they issue a new license. And that is wonderful for a brand new operating facility. It serves its purpose. But for already operating, someone who's already has long established quality care, it's redundant and actually punitive. So that is definitely one policy that could absolutely be changed to fix that problem and help providers expand and actually cure our wait lists.
Thank you. I would say for home-based childcare, we need a uniform pathway, an easy pathway for zoning approval for operations. As it stands right now, you have to have vested interest in a property before you can petition for secondary use for a business in your home. So I have to have money down and be in contract to buy a house before I know whether or not I can operate my home business that provides for my family from that home. And we've lost money in equity going through that process, and not everybody has the ability to do that. It's a big hearing. There were lawyers present. I'm from Maryland, where zoning approval, it was a $15 check and a piece of paper in the mail, and this took months and thousands of dollars. There's no clear, uniform pathway because of the way that the Commonwealth is governed with local zoning ordinance. And I would also say clear, easy access to insurance. As it stands right now, I'm very lucky to have insurance. I don't think that I could get it rewritten. I'm not sure how I got my policy. I have home and auto and my daycare all wrapped up, bundled together when my teenager became of driving age, and I learned the astronomical rate to insure a teenager in the home. I did what every parent does and went shopping for cheaper insurance for my teen, but I was told if I severed my policy, they would not rewrite and include the daycare coverage. I spent weeks on the phone. I was not able to find one person who would agree to provide that insurance. So, and I cannot imagine, we're talking about what would make it easier to expand and increase access. And at the polar opposite of the end, we need to think, right now, Octal is in the process of completely redoing the regulations in which they're talking about doubling staffing capacity. So specifically with family-based childcare, they're suggesting that their own children count towards their ratio. And for group home childcare, they're saying if 2 or more children are in care, you need a full-time staff member. So a service I provided to the community by myself for a decade and a half, I would now need a full-time staff member to continue to operate. It is prohibitive, and it's going to result into common sense consequences, closure, or increased cost to families.
Thank you, Representative Schlegel. Representative Barger.
Thank you, folks. Well, you guys are smart, and you care about this. This is very clear. I like to put the cookies on the bottom shelf for simple people like me. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, just for brief answers to simplify it so that I can understand the issue. All right. So we like to talk about regulatory environment, which is a lot of syllables. So I'm just going to use the word government rule book. Is that all right with you? Okay, government rule book. In your opinion, is the government rule book that kind of tells you folks how you have to operate and all the hoops that you got to jump through to provide the service that you're providing to the community? In a word or two, how would you describe that rule book? If you only had a word or two, especially you, Director, only a word or two, what would you use?
I'd say wasteful.
Wasteful.
And time consuming.
Wasteful and time consuming.
Doesn't increase quality at all.
That's my next question.
Sorry.
That was my next. How did you know? You've got superpowers. You're smart and you care and you've got superpowers. Do you think the rule book is improving the quality of service you're providing Pennsylvania families?
No.
Does anybody disagree?
I think the rule book is important. Our young children that we're providing care for are our most vulnerable Pennsylvanians.
Sure.
A lot can go wrong. A lot has gone wrong, and that's why the rule book exists to begin with.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we have a base level of health and safety standards so we don't have kids in basements with no ventilation.
Right.
So we have proper and appropriate discipline and behavior modification techniques. I think the rule book is important. My concern is the punitive measures that are taken with providers who are really working and trying hard when there is a minor lapse, such as 1 minute and 45 seconds for a child who was intentionally hiding.
Yeah, and maybe I shouldn't just say no. There should be basic standards.
Oh, I got
basic
you.
standards. So maybe
I
my quick
got
answer.
you.
But any quality provider is not going to go below those standards anyway. I've
No.
never put the infant in the basement.
I appreciate that. And I think I understand what you folks are saying. But just to be sure, my last question is this. Do you think the government rule book is making child care more affordable for Pennsylvania families?
No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been doing this my whole life. And like I said, my first center was a higher quality, and we charged half the rate. Now, times have changed. I understand inflation. We charged half what we do now. I would never, going over 200 a week, I would have hyperventilated. I'm now higher in the 300s to 400 range for childcare, so no.
Thank you. Thank you for putting the cookies on the bottom shelf for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Barger. Representative Diorsi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony here this morning. I wanted to touch on the Keystone Stars system, and congratulations in advance for anyone who's high rated. Sarah, I think you said your center was a 4-star. I'm not exactly sure why government is in the business, though, of rating childcare. I would guess that parents are better suited for that, but I'll ask my question. It seems as though the Keystone Stars program favors bigger centers with more resources, and centers that focus on things that frankly, my wife and I, when we search for childcare, aren't near the top of our list. Attending conferences, training, having a doctorate or a master's degree. So I guess my question is it a positive? Is it a negative? Why is government involved in rating? And might it penalize smaller centers that don't have the capacity to pursue some of these requirements?
I'd love to jump in on this one.
Go for it.
So I used to participate in the STARS program. I no longer participate. For me, burdensome, that's the one word I would give back to you regarding regulation as well. For me, it equated to an additional 3 months of heavy paperwork. And I had the issue where I moved 1.5 miles down the street, and it was considered starting over. Your STARS does not transition. And I had worked up at that point, and it had taken years. And it just absolutely was not worth the effort for me.
Can I just throw a tidbit in there? Your STARS didn't transfer, but some providers it does. So why does it transfer for some and not others? Just wondering.
Do you know the answer to that?
Yeah. So again, from having centers for a long time, the STARS program did a huge revamp. Probably 15 years ago. The STARS program that is currently in place is not the same that when it started. When we originally started, there was a lot of quality initiatives. You know, what do your classrooms look like? There were people who came in and sat in your classrooms and would assess, like, hey, you don't have enough blocks, you don't have enough things. And that may seem tedious, but it only happened every 3 years. Since COVID, none of those people come out anymore, and we self-assess ourselves. So it's not, I understand that documentation is needed for funding, but the documentation that's being provided now is not valid. It's not actual, you can't, it's not accountable because people can fill out those papers any way they want. It has just become a paperwork thing. When they did, we used to have grants with the initial one, which was super helpful. Yeah, okay, you came in, you said, I need more blocks. Let's buy more blocks. There was funding. There is no funding. The only thing that STARS gets us now is a higher subsidy reimbursement and our ability to participate in pre-K counts. That is the only reason that I did pre-K, that I did STAR 4 at my York Center, was so that I could do pre-K counts. And the only reason I did STARS up north was because I have subsidy families and I care. Because if they don't get the reimbursement rate, then I have to charge them the difference. Or I have to take that hit. Well, that's just hurting families, but it doesn't ever balance. It's not what it used to be.
For me, 87% of our families receive some type of subsidy to be there. We have a very diverse program. We service top WellSpan employees, and we service the woman down the street in New York City. It works very well for us. We do receive a higher reimbursement rate for kids that are receiving child care subsidy dollars to be there. We do. That being said, being in this field and in this county for a long time, we have to find a way to professionalize our field. The women who work for me
saying DHS, this is the way it's going to be, and you better stay in line.
Obviously, I'm a very blunt person. I do not think that it is ever explicitly said to inspectors in those exact words that you cannot speak out. Actually, in orientation, you were told that if anyone from the media or House or Senate, you were told to call one department and hand that card off. So maybe that's a little bit of a deterrent because you never get inspectors to come. That does not mean that they do not want to be here. They do. There are some that have retired since COVID who I would think that you guys would love to talk to. Because, and I think it's not just from the things that go on at DHS. I think it's a frustration. It's a lot of frustration because they do have things to offer. Traditionally, inspectors did not have education backgrounds. They came from other departments. That's obviously changed since the 2020 change, since we got cited from the federal government. They have put more people who have education-based experience in there. But I will also still state that any department in the government is allowed to transfer in, and they do, into being an inspector because we are at a higher retirement rate. So recently we have people who are previous post officers, like post mailmen, who have tried their hand at inspecting. We get a lot of people from Childline who have heard the most horrible things that have happened to children, and then they're asked to go into quality facilities, but they have that experience in the back of their head, and it's not helpful. So have they ever explicitly said no? No. I will say that as an inspector, when I would go outside of the DHS ball, I had facilities who should not have been operating, and DHS said, our hands are tied. I did go outside of the ball game and call codes enforcement, and because there were situations children were in that I couldn't be okay with, and had code enforcement step in, and I got reprimanded for that because that's not what we're supposed to do. No, I thought what we were supposed to do was protect children. So I'm okay with that reprimand. I'll take it all day. Yep.
All right, we're going to move to the next panel in 5 minutes. So you're not off the hook yet, but we have 2 questions left, so we're going to keep them short and sweet. Representative Mao, Chairman Mao, I apologize.
Thank you. I'll make statement, question, another statement very quickly. Thank you for being here. And if this was a TV show, I spent 12 years on Children and Youth Committee in Harrisburg. So I would hit the rerun button and look for another channel because I've heard this so many times over the years. It hasn't really changed. As a matter of fact, I think it's gotten a little bit worse. Very quickly, salaries of people working in your industry, very quickly, just what range are we talking? So I know that how rich these people are getting.
That's okay. So the average in York County, and there's Katie's in the crowd, and she can testify. I believe it's around $29,000 average. However, if we're talking about my in particular program, building a culture over a century, my bachelor level teachers start at around $28 an hour, and my master degree teachers start between $34 and $38.
That's fair, but the average.
Not that we are an anomaly.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Average for childcare workers, $30,000 annually, and for home-based childcare provider, $45,000 net.
So they're all getting rich. Okay, I got you. Thank you so much. It's hard to believe you can find people in this day and age, but God bless them. God bless you for what you're doing. Jessica, yeah. Mark just went basically where I was going to go with one of my questions. Do you think the inspectors are trained properly?
No.
And I'm going to tell you, okay. I like your bluntness. Yeah, I had a situation very close here in a small town, just up right, Littlestown, where an inspector came into a home operation where she had 3 children that she took in, but she also had 3 foster children. And somebody called Ochdale and said, hey, too many kids here. I don't like my neighbor down the street having all those kids. They're not hers, blah, 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 blah. The inspector stopped in and wrote her a cease and desist order. Got the attorney to follow that up. I had to call the secretary, the deputy secretary, I'm sorry, to let him know that if he reads the actual law, foster children are your children and they don't count against the other 3.
Right now, there is an influx of new inspectors because they're not keeping them either.
Right.
Then they're coming out into the field. So right now, at least in our region, they just did a changeover of inspectors. And, everybody complains about their inspectors, but we kept ours. And I am so happy because I know that she's been there and she's been a child care provider because I tell providers I refuse to do DHS's job and train their inspectors when they come out to my site, because that's what I end up doing with a lot of them.
Quickly finish with saying I introduced a bill many years ago that says any promulgated regulation prior to its implementation would have to pass the oversight committee in the House and the Senate. Until we get that done, you're going to have bureaucrats just running wild, which is what you have in this situation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairwoman Klunk.
Thank you. I have a couple, hopefully quick questions. Sarah, question for you about the Twilight Care Program. How did that come to be? How are you making it work? And what are the hurdles for you from a regulatory standpoint in making that work for our families?
So we have been talking about how to meet this need in York County for probably 25 years at this point. everyone's holdup is really, and there are lots of providers that are now trying to do this, thinking about it, we're seeing where it goes, is that how are we going to staff it? If we can't staff during the day, how on earth are we going to staff at night? I do not know of many people who have tried it before, if any. However, we decided to go for it. There are two reasons we did it. One is because we're altruistic, right? And we're meeting this community need, and it is a community need, with 17% of York County's workforce working non-traditional hours. It was absolutely a need. But secondly, as you've heard me testify, we have a rather large gap in what it costs to provide care and reduce turnover and maintain staff, and what we actually bring in tuition. And so as an executive director, I had to get creative and figure out how we were going to fill that gap. And Twilight Care, although we are doing it for the community need, is also an answer to that. We can only have so many children in our facility. And so without expanding to a new facility, which also has additional cost, how do we create operational dollars to fill that gap on the business side while being able to pay our teachers a livable wage, to prevent them from leaving and going somewhere else, and be able to support the community at the same time. And that was part of our solution to be able to do that.
And so are there any regulatory issues that you've run into with
None.
providing? None.
None at this point. We are one of the first and only who do this in the state. And so all of the daytime regulations also are the same overnight. There has not been any additional regulations that have been placed on us. There has not been, as far as I know, talk about additional regulations for Twilight Care. And so at this point, we run at night, same as we do during the day.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Question for Jessica. I know you talked about the child care recruitment and retention program. Have you heard how they're planning on tracking these funds and where they came up with this additional money per person? Did they include that in any of those emails? Because we're trying to figure that out. Because as far as I know, we didn't appropriate any additional money for the program.
From my understanding, you guys are an allotted amount, so it's based on how many people applied. So however many people applied, was there still leftover money? They figured out they have to get rid of it, so that's why they increased the amount. That has happened several times on other grants, but typically in the past they have issued the grant and then said, hey, we have extra money, we're going to send an additional $125. In order to, for accountability purposes, it is a simple form that they will just provide, and then I would just provide a payroll report, and then we would just keep that. We don't provide it to the state, we just sign our name and say that we did it.
Thank you. Another quick follow-up for you. I know that you have experience within Octel. So how does Octel, and you talked about PDE regulations, how do they actually work together? Are they talking to one another? Is there a liaison that bridges that gap? Because it seems like there's a disconnect, and I don't understand why.
The why. So physically, PDE and DHS are literally on the same floor at 333 Market. Their cubicles physically butt up to each other, but we at the state, we called it the silo effect. At least that's what some of us inspectors called it. You could sit at, back then it was called DRA, which is Octel, the headquarters. You could sit there and listen to someone from PDE talking to a provider and saying, I don't know anything about this, you're going to have to call DHS. I don't know the number, whatever. When they literally could have transferred the call or said, hey, give me your name and number, let me walk over to someone over there. They are on the same floor. Socially, they may talk to each other. Professionally, they want nothing to do with each other. Nothing to do with each other. Unfortunately, I would say that comes a bit more from the PDE side. And I think that's just, in general, everyone has thought that, K through 12 educators are more qualified and more professional than childcare providers. So it trickles down to there too. that most of the people that have worked there have degrees. And then unfortunately in DHS, there's a lot of people who work at headquarters who have never stepped foot in a child care facility. And they may have qualified for their position because they worked at a Head Start or a juvenile delinquent center or something that may have had someone under the age of 18 in it, but not childcare. So I spent 2 days down in Oakdale just because, and I requested it because I just wanted to see how it worked. And I was not happy. I was really, I don't want to say appalled, but I was very taken back by the lack of communication and the lack of working together that occurs between those two departments. I will also say to Sarah's question about the Twilight, there have been some centers that have tried it within Dauphin County. As an inspector, they generally get shut down because they are not able to find staff who will work that shift, or they're not able to stay awake. So I can tell you I've gone to complaints where there is one person with 20 children. It's not for a lack of need. It's for a lack of staffing and compliance that they are not in operation.
Thank you for your comments. I just want to let you know DHS is actually watching. I am getting emails from DHS right now. So I am speaking to DHS right now. Please listen to this panel. Listen to the providers. Listen to their concerns about these regulations. Work with them so that we can ultimately work to create a childcare system that works for our providers, our families, and our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Klunk. I want to thank our first panel. That was incredibly informative. I know that we had a couple other members with questions, but we do got to keep moving. If you guys are able to stick around, I know that our members might want to chat with you individually. We'll have our comms folks as round two to chat with you guys. We're going to go ahead and bring up the second panel. First of all, I do want to recognize we have been joined by Representative Mike Jones. Thank you, Representative Jones from the 93rd District representing York County. He's with us now. Our panel number two, we have Ms. Dee Stremmel. She's the Family and Consumer Science Educator at Southwestern High School. We have Elena Maich. She is from the New Beginnings Learning Center. We have Cynthia Simpson. She's the Director of Talent at Utz Brands Incorporated. We have Jake Taylor, the Executive Director of the Hanover Area Chamber of Commerce. And we have President Commissioner Julie Wheeler from York County. President Commissioner Wheeler, thank you for joining us again. Great to have you back with the Policy Committee. All right, Ms. Stremmel, you're up first. Same rules, 3 to 5 minutes. We got to get through this. I know members are going to have more questions, so short and to the point is what we need.
I will do that because I'm going to throw most of my stuff out the window. I'm actually, for once, very fortunate to be in the Department of Education, and I run a program that is beloved in the community. It's been running for over 40 years. So we have a preschool in a high school. And it is an authentic learning environment. So we have the teenagers who are the teachers. They develop or create developmentally appropriate activities for children who are 3 and potty trained up to kindergarten. So it is an amazing program to be part of. So I can be part of the light here because I get to work with young people who are aspiring to be professionals in the system. So we have, even though preschool does not suit the current family situation because it is a shortened time, over 2 hours a day, our preschool is booked out for up to 2 years at a time. So again, even preschools get booked out. I don't think a lot of the community programs totally fill sometimes because they're mostly in churches, except for the preschools that are running in childcare centers, which you know their issues. So we are fortunate in a lot of ways, but I will say I have a lot of teenagers who are thinking to go into childcare and early childhood education, and Elena was a former student, and so she is one of those great students I get to work with. I get to work with the students who step up and want to do things. However, seeing the horizon, most of the teenagers are looking more for education because of benefits and salary differentials, and also, or I get a lot of students who just want to work with children and there's nowhere else to go, so they want to be teachers, they want to be psychologists, occupational therapists. So we have 2 levels. One's a teacher, and then they can come back and be interns and help with kind of the mid-level management and running the program and helping the teachers plan and facilitate. So I don't have to deal with all of the paperwork and all of that thing. So I have a pretty nice job. And I'm trying to think, we used to have a CDA prep. That was a certificate teenagers could get. And most child care centers used to require that. It's a child development associate. Extensive portfolio, we helped them prep, and they would go out. We had partnerships with child care centers where they would go out, and Alena Center is one, that took some of our teenagers and stuff, and they would get some of the 480 hours that they need to for direct care. I don't think a lot of child care centers are requiring that anymore, so we might bring that back if that would be an issue. Obviously, we are very different than a tech center or the CTEs, which one is in York, and then in Gettysburg, since they don't have one, I think Gettysburg High School has more of an all-day program. But we just run a short program, but it does allow for teenagers to kind of look into the future. We do have some collaboration with the Ys and stuff to try to get those teenagers in to help staff when the parents are working out, those type of programs. Or I try to go around on field trips and see some child care centers and make some connections where our kids can start as volunteers, because of course the child care centers are trying to get some of our teenagers interested so then they can kind of funnel into positions. So that's our role.
Thank you. Ms. Myatt.
So my world of childcare is slightly different. I grew up in childcare. My mother has owned a childcare since I was born. My goal is to become the director so she is able to retire. And I have watched her over the years slowly hate her job due to the fact of overregulation and things such as the inability to hire quality staff is a major problem, as we had a staff member who we hired that then was unable to be still a staff because at one point her Maryland clearance was told that she was okay. But now all of a sudden when we submit the same form with the same information, DHS says it's not okay. So we had to let her go because of that. She's a great employee, but we were unable to keep her for that purpose. Because you have to, if they live out of state for they've not lived in Pennsylvania for 5 years, they are required to have out-of-state clearances. The other issue that we are having is our previous state rep, certification rep, was choosing, because her and my mother did not have a great relationship, she was choosing to over-scrutinize certain things within our program. This happened, and Kate actually came to the center and witnessed this. And it is a problem, and I am happy that our 5 years is over and she is gone. But she looked right at my mother and told her, my goal is to shut you down. That is not what you want from the people in charge of you. So my goal is to take over, but I'm being told that we want to shut you down, but yet, so you're telling me my future livelihood is gone. And what I wanted to do is gone. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Oh, I missed that part. It's okay.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Myatt. I think you speak to the fact that people love what they do in childcare. They love the kids. They love the opportunities they provide. And the fact that somebody would tell you they want to shut you down is the reason we've lost 62 centers in Pennsylvania. So.
She is in college and student teaching, and she wants to work in childcare, but she's student teaching in an elementary school because that is what the requirement is also. She's not really allowed to student teach in a childcare center, which is interesting.
Well, thank you for your dedication, sincerely. Cynthia, you're up.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. This is an amazing opportunity to hear all of the different challenges that area centers are experiencing, and it helps to color things for us as an employer. So my name is Cynthia Simpson. I'm the Director of Talent at Utz Quality Foods, and I'm also the board chair for the Chamber of Commerce. Utz has over 1,200 associates in the Hanover area, and childcare is certainly an important issue because of its impact on the area's workforce. As a representative of the Chamber, I'm also aware of the challenges that area businesses face because of the childcare shortage. We appreciate the work that this committee is doing to gather information, to really gather the real facts on the ground to come up with common sense solutions. It's helpful to hear and help truly understand what the barriers are so that we can be part of the solution. While at the higher level of our business, childcare availability has not significantly hindered our ability to produce and distribute our snacks, we recognize that childcare issues can be a major stressor and can impact our associates' quality of life. This is very important to us. Many of our associates are parents or caregivers. When they have peace of mind about their children's care, they're able to come to work focused, engaged, and ready to contribute their best efforts. This internally strengthens our company and our community. Removing barriers for working parents can have a ripple effect, reducing absenteeism, boosting morale, and helping us attract and retain talent. I'm pleased to be here on behalf of UTS and the Chamber so that we can be part of the solution. We're supportive of options that improve childcare availability, balancing the important need to protect children with the goal of avoiding overly burdensome regulations and credentialing requirements that could limit access or discourage providers from entering the field. While childcare may not be the most visible challenge facing our business, we believe that supporting improvements in this area will yield positive results for our workforce, our company, and our community as a whole. Thank you for the opportunity to join this conversation and to work together toward meaningful change.
Thank you very much, Director Simpson. Director Taylor.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here with you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jake Taylor, and I'm honored to be here representing the hundreds of nonprofits and businesses that make up the Hanover Area Chamber of Commerce to take part in this important conversation. Today, I'd like to speak about childcare not strictly as a family issue, which it certainly is, but as a workforce and economic issue. For employers across our region, childcare is one of the quietest but most disruptive barriers to productivity and growth. When childcare falls through, employees miss work. When childcare is unaffordable or unavailable, parents reduce hours, turn down promotions, or leave the workforce altogether. Businesses then absorb the cost through absenteeism, turnover, overtime, lost productivity, and difficulty hiring and retaining employees. The data on this is clear. In Pennsylvania, breakdowns in childcare cost the economy, I see you have it up there already, $3.4 billion each year. Employers alone bear about $2.8 billion of that burden through absenteeism and turnover. More than half of parents in Pennsylvania report missing work because of childcare problems, and nearly 1 in 10 say they've left a job because of these issues. That's not a side issue, that's a direct workforce constraint. This affects, of course, businesses of every size, but small businesses feel it most of all. Unlike large corporations, small employers often don't have the staffing depth or benefit packages to absorb repeated absences. When one employee can't come to work, the impact is immediate and often severe. That means childcare shortages are not just making life harder for working families, they're making it harder for businesses to operate, expand, and to compete. We also know this is not a problem that solves itself. Pennsylvania, as mentioned earlier, has around 3,000 unfilled childcare jobs statewide. If those positions were filled, roughly 25,000 more children could have access to care, which would allow for more parents to go to work with peace of mind. In other words, strengthening the childcare system strengthens the workforce pipeline. The good news is that solutions do exist and businesses can be a part of them. Employers have already shown that childcare support can produce a return on investment. Backup care, childcare stipends, flexible scheduling, and public-private partnerships have all been used successfully by employers to improve retention and reduce absenteeism. Pennsylvania has also taken a step in the right direction through the Employer Child Care Contribution Tax Credit, which helps businesses support employees with childcare costs. Those are the kind of practical, pro-workforce solutions we should be expanding. From the Chamber's standpoint specifically, the message is simple. Childcare is the infrastructure for the labor force. Just as roads, utilities, and broadband support economic growth, so does access to reliable childcare. If we want people to work, businesses to grow, and communities to thrive, then we need policies that make childcare more accessible, more affordable, and more sustainable. The Hanover Area Chamber of Commerce is not only asking for greater investment in childcare, but also for practical reforms that make it easier to open, staff, and sustain childcare facilities. That includes modernizing outdated credentialing requirements that can prevent qualified individuals from entering the field, creating fast-track pathways for retired teachers and other experienced professionals to help fill staffing gaps, and reducing unnecessary delays and barriers in the permitting and approval processes for childcare providers. If we want more childcare options in our community, we need to lower the barriers that keep capable providers from opening their doors and keeping them open. Thank you again for your time today. Thank you for addressing this important issue, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Commissioner Wheeler.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Rowe, and honorable members of the committee for the invitation to speak to you today on the important topic of childcare affordability. And thank you to Representative Klunk for hosting the committee here in York County. My name is Julie Wheeler, and I serve as President Commissioner on the York County Board of Commissioners. And I'm pleased to speak with you today regarding the need for affordable childcare in Pennsylvania, both for childhood development and for economic development reasons. Early childhood education is simply not a service. It is essential infrastructure for our community. Something that hasn't been stated that I want to make a point of is 95% of brain development occurs within the first 5 years of someone's life. Investments in childcare and early childhood education are investments in our families, our workforce, and our economy. Over the past year, York County residents participated in a comprehensive quality of life survey to help guide future decision-making and provide point-in-time understanding of where we are as a community. The results of that survey were clear. Families want safe, affordable, high-quality childcare that is accessible and located where they live and work. And they affirm what statistics have shown, which is that access to quality, affordable childcare is essential to better economic outcomes in our community. When families cannot find affordable, reliable childcare, parents leave jobs. Employers struggle with absenteeism, high turnover rates, and recruitment challenges. That, in turn, hinders economic growth for the community. But when we invest strategically in early learning, we unlock opportunity, both for our children and our economy. And that's what we've been doing in York County, both through the Early Childhood Educator Award Program and the Every Child Has Opportunities Program, which we lovingly call ECHO. Both of these programs were launched in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. I do want to be clear, though. Access to quality and affordable childcare has been a barrier in York County long before the pandemic, but the pandemic certainly made an existing problem worse. Prior to 2020, York County had 220 early education centers. Following the pandemic, that number dropped to 170, a decrease of 22%. Essentially, 1 in 5 early childhood education centers closed. Making matters worse, we saw a mass exodus of educators from the workforce, and those centers that remained operating were approximately 85% of teacher capacity. So due to student-teacher ratios, that means fewer students could be served. While I'm outlining the situation in York County, it's important to understand that this problem spans all across Pennsylvania. The York County Early Childhood Educator Award Program was launched in 2022 with the goal of improving teacher retention and education levels while also increasing the capacity and quality of child care programs in the county. Research shows that the tenure and education level of teachers positively impacts outcomes for children. As you are aware, the average early educator in Pennsylvania earns an average of $12.10 per hour, or approximately $25,000 per year. In most cases, the Early Childhood Educator Retention Program granted an average of $2,000, or about 8% of the average annual salary to retain these educators. Ask any center director and they'll tell you, it's incredibly difficult to retain a teacher at $12 per hour when your local Sheets is paying $17. Early childhood education centers cannot simply raise salaries because we have a broken child care model. Centers cannot charge the true cost of care, and as such, they cannot compensate at market rates. York County is proud to support the Early Childhood Educator Award Program annually, including an initial investment of $750,000 from ARPA funding that started the program. This is aligned with our Economic Action Plan. It's aligned with the York County Strong Recovery Task Force recommendations, both of which identified child care access as a barrier to stable employment in York County. Since the program launched, over $1.6 million has been awarded to over 1,000 educators serving over 12,000 children. In 2024, over $674,000 was awarded to 404 staff at 67 programs throughout York County, serving 4,561 children. But investing in our teachers is only part of the equation. The ECHO program aims to address York County's child care issues for what it is, an economic challenge. ECHO's investments are intentionally focused on the root of the child care problem, provider access and affordability. Led by Community Connections for Children and the York County Economic Alliance, the ECHO program utilizes a coordinated, data-informed approach to expand access to high-quality early childhood education, particularly for children from low-income families. ECHO integration grants are awarded to providers for innovative projects that expand the number of children and families served and increase the quality of care and education provided. The Bloom Startup Child Care Forgivable Loans Program, a program of the York County Economic Alliance's Bloom Business Empowerment Center, offers loans to help launch new early childhood education businesses across York County. ECHO also offers professional development mini-grants for early childhood educators to build their professional skills and increase their knowledge, while the ECHO Teacher Aid program offers an early learning apprenticeship for individuals seeking to gain experience in the early childhood education field. Since its launch 2 years ago, ECHO has invested over $3.4 million to boost York County's early childhood education system, and the results speak for themselves. The ECHO program has helped increase access to childcare, creating nearly 1,800 new childcare seats since 2024. In addition, these investments have helped more than 300 early childhood educators into the workforce, and we've seen 24 early childhood providers launch since the ECHO program started. The goal of the ECHO program is to serve as a community catalyst for innovation and collaboration to address the structural challenges limiting opportunities for children, families, and early childhood educators. The program was born from necessity, as our early childhood system in York County, and indeed across the Commonwealth, is in crisis. In the last 5 years, York County has lost nearly half of our early childhood education providers. We do not have enough providers to meet the demand. We have more than 21,600 children under the age of 5 in York County, but just as a little more than half of those children have access to a childcare seat. Current providers are operating on average at 85% of typical enrollment due to teacher and workforce shortages. Early childhood education program wait lists average between 50 to 75 children, and many have just stopped adding names to their list. It's a problem that affects families, employers, and our economy. When parents cannot find reliable childcare, they cannot fully participate in the workforce. Expanding access to high-quality learning is not just a family issue, it's an economic imperative. Our York County Economic Alliance, which serves as the countywide chamber and economic development corporation, is engaged in this issue primarily due to the fact that access to childcare is the #1 reason cited for workforce absenteeism. This statistic was backed up by surveys by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, the United Way of Pennsylvania, and our own local York County Community Survey. In fact, it is estimated that our Commonwealth loses out on more than $6.6 billion in economic productivity, earnings, and tax revenue due to inadequate childcare. But York County is stepping up to meet that demand through ECHO. But it's not just the Economic Alliance and Community Connections for Children. It's also a generous business and philanthropic community, including significant support from the J. William Wareheim Foundation, the Powder Mill Foundation, WellSpan Health, Kinsley Foundation, the United Way of York, the York County Community Foundation, and York County government. What we've seen happen when a community comes together to solve difficult challenges, and that's what we do here in York County. We collaborate, we innovate, and we activate our community to achieve real solutions that work. In fact, if imitation is the greatest form of flattery, York County is mighty flattered now that the Commonwealth has launched both the Child Care Staff Recruitment and Retention Program, with $25 million budgeted in 2025, and a pilot innovation grant program for early childhood education centers. Clearly, they are watching what York County is doing, seeing the success and replicating it. York County is positioning early childhood education as a cornerstone of a regional workforce strategy. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis shows that every dollar invested in high-quality early childhood education yields as much as $16 in value for the community by increasing the economic mobility of future generations and reducing societal costs by lowering the crime rate and improving health outcomes. But beyond return on investment, this work is about something even more, helping families achieve the American dream of providing a better life for their children and their grandchildren. Together, we are building a stronger foundation for families and for our economy today and for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wheeler. We're going to move it to member questions now. Representative Gatos.
And thank you to government has done, which was certainly intended to make our daycare safer and more affordable, has sometimes, or it appears that it's become super bureaucratic, expensive, and clearly it's exhausting for both parents and healthcare workers. So we want to fix this. And as I always say, more government is not an answer to bad government, but getting kids or young adults into this career, what would you say is the some of the motivating factors that, I mean, outside of pay and some other things, what would you say that really gets young adults into this career?
Well, I would say they love working with younger children, and a lot of students like that age range better than school age. But as I said, sometimes the economics change that. But just the love of young children and being with them, and once they have an experience in a high school where they've gotten to work with kids, most of them are like, wow, I love this. This is what I want to do in some form or fashion. So I think they need some experience. So if they can get to the child care centers or the Ys and the summer camps and in schools, if schools can offer more authentic learning environments and internships into child care centers, I think that would open up a lot of eyes.
I think it's the
Are there
same.
currently, sorry,
just gonna
are
add-
there currently sorry, are there currently opportunities for young adults that can come in as internships? I know we have our career and technical centers in schools like Parkway Tech or Rosedale, and they're working on training these capable young people to get involved. Is that helping?
Absolutely. I mean, we have internships in all branches in all areas. Seniors can go out as long as they can drive, can go out and spend time in different companies and organizations, but they can certainly spend time in child care centers and Ys and other things and schools. So they do have opportunities to do that from a school base.
So as kind of a follow-up question, and I've been working with some of our career and technical schools, what we found too is that and I didn't necessarily think of this in this particular career, but young adults who go through these programs to get trained, they're capable, but oftentimes they're shut out because of their birthday, that they can't come at once they graduate. And so we're working on some legislation right now that will let these high school graduates with, of course, the proper education to start to work right away, so that they're not just shut out because their birthday lands on the later part of the year. But we definitely need to invest in getting these young teachers involved, and I appreciate your comment.
So I would just add that some of the things that we're doing in York, we have a pre-apprenticeship model that deals with the child development associate instruction and on-the-job training that we're doing through Community Connections for Children. And I'll give a kudos shout out to Southwestern and York County School of Technology and others who are helping us lead this work. So it is about partnering with the local school districts. They are key if we want to cultivate the pipeline.
Great. Well, let's work on that.
I'm in.
Representative Gleim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. My question actually does go along those same lines, where we can't student teach in childcare for childcare, and you must student teach in elementary school. That is ridiculous.
You are welcome to student teach in childcare, but only if it's a pre-K counts classroom.
Right.
And there is not enough of those that have the teacher status that there needs to be for those students to student teach in. So I was placed in a first grade classroom in Park Hills rather than a childcare.
Okay.
Because there wasn't the accessibility or the access to enough for that choice.
Right, so that probably goes along the line from the last panel was saying there was an effort in 2016, to force, I guess you would say, the national movement to integrate the pre-K with the K through 12. But now we know that all of the education has been sent down to the states. So it's really up to our state, which has an abysmal rating of 48th in the nation, to do something about that particular situation. And maybe you don't know the answer to this, but why can't students 17 and 18 years old work in a daycare or child care setting?
The regulation says they have to be 18.
Which regulation?
I don't know the number.
Is it federal? Because
It's
state.
state, yeah.
Okay. So because child labor laws from the U.S. standpoint are saying it has to be high risk for that 18 age, and this isn't considered high risk. So our state is overregulating that particular standpoint on this. And I just want to commend the ECHO program. I think that's a great program. So is there, the real question I have after all of this is there a dollar figure, or do you all have a dollar figure if we did or were able to take that particular regulation away and you were able to hire 17-year-olds or even have an apprenticeship program, let's say? We talked about co-ops, but we didn't talk necessarily about paid apprenticeship programs. Is there a dollar figure where you think you could recoup from getting rid of regulations?
I don't have a dollar figure in mind, but what I can tell you is the Chamber manages 4 different apprenticeship programs, automotive technician specialist, a couple of others, and the results that we've heard from our business community for those programs that we manage is fantastic. They're able to attract talent, keep it local, and fulfill a lot of these workforce needs that they're dealing with on a daily basis. So while I don't have numbers with you, I can tell you that it would be a tremendous boon to the local economy and to the state.
Thank you.
Representative Stender.
We've had a few of these hearings starting last year back in my district. However, something that Commissioner that you mentioned in your testimony that I have not heard before is you mentioned some of the ARPA funding. I think Pennsylvania got somewhere around $16 billion total. Can you just highlight again for us the commitment that York County made through the ARPA funding that they received?
Yeah, we made a $750,000 commitment, and then we went out and got the philanthropic community to match that so we could set up an endowment, because obviously the ARPA funding was only a one-time funding. And the reason we were able to do that, as I mentioned earlier, part of our economic action plan outlines childcare as a priority, but also during COVID, we went to various community stakeholders and created this task force. And what we heard from that, again, was childcare. So we used data to make the decision, but when we allocated the funding, we felt so strongly that this was important that we needed to allocate some of our ARPA funding.
Thank you. I think it's just a wonderful opportunity to really show that, I can think of some of the third-class cities just in this region who got excess of $40 million, who they don't have a lot to show for it here. We are in 2026, but I think that commitment from, the leadership in York County really will, reverberate back for years to come. So thank you for that information. It's very helpful, but also great work in highlighting childcare here.
Representative Ledbetter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the good chairwoman from York County for hosting this, as well as the good gentleman from Northumberland County speaking to this being a continuation of the conversation that was started this session in Montour County, but as Chairman Mao alluded to, has been a discussion going on for some time now. When I think back to that hearing, I came to the conclusion that there is no public appointed voice in Ochdale. It's filled with bureaucrats. And that's appalling and certainly concerning and should be alarming to Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth, because we do have publicly appointed stakeholders on everything from the body that governs ATVs in Pennsylvania to the PUC. And I notably made mention that that means that the public has more of a say on how a casino is ran through the Gaming Commission than on how a child care facility should be operated. So again, just a massive disconnect in Pennsylvania in where common sense lives in reality versus where bureaucrats craft these regulations. So with that in mind, we started with a safety goal, or at least that's the expectation that Ochdale presents, that we started with a safety goal. But where we ended up was with a compliance system that governs input so tightly, based on the testimony from the last panel as well as you all, that it reduces the number of providers who can participate in this arena at all. And when we consider the juxtaposition between what the intent is versus what's implemented, we have to consider an outcome rule, which is usually a good thing, what must not happen. So the previous panel used an example: children must not be left in an unventilated basement, or children must be safe and properly cared for. That's an outcome rule, versus this perspective overlay that has plagued childcare, and how you must do things, right? Thermostat levels, room specifications, staff ratios, documentation requirements. And those are two very different regulatory environments, two very different government rule books. And if we think of emergency rooms, if they were governed like child care centers, the medical response to emergencies would collapse under their own weight. In medicine, this is not foreign to either the regulatory stakeholders in Pennsylvania or us as lawmakers. We do it already. In medicine, they use standards of care doctrine. They have peer review. They have institutional protocols that allow deviation on case-by-case metrics. So we do this. This isn't some magical thing that we aren't implementing already in other areas of society that require stringent oversight and have high stakes for the individuals who are participating. There are people who die in emergency rooms, and then there are people who are cared for. ER medicine is not light on regulations, and it is outcome accountable, not input determined. And so if the difference is not regulation versus no regulation, because I don't think anyone who cares for children desire for absence of regulations or background checks for providers or common sense things like that, we need to attempt to understand how we need to get away from pre-engineering every decision through a compliance checklist and instead getting back to trusting the professionals. So in the spirit of that, very briefly, testifiers, in the spirit of trusting the professionals, you all may have different answers, but what is a major existing requirement, take your pick, a major existing requirement that you would change to an outcome-based standard that would replace an emphasis on compliance and instead elevate your judgment as stakeholders in this space? Because then that gives us a checklist that we can start working on. So what would be one of those existing requirements that you would change to an outcome-based standard?
Who wants to go first?
Last panel?
So I'm not a provider, but I can just, going back to the question from earlier, the age requirement, I think that's an easy, simple fix that opens the doors to, fixing this gap, this workforce gap that we're seeing on the employer side.
Okay, so as she discussed, we have students that have graduated high school, but yet they are not 18, so technically they're not allowed to work in the center. We've had to tell 3 people no since January because we had looked at the letter they got from their principal was not good enough to classify them as graduated, and they are not 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to make this rapid fire. And most of it's for the better suited for the previous panel, but that means, Elena, you're on the hook here. So first, a couple very quick comments. We're not having enough children in this country to sustain our population. We need a birth rate of 2.1 per female. We're at 1.6. That is a big, big problem. And one of the main reasons people aren't having more children is because of the cost of child care. This ties directly to elder care, because just the same way we don't have enough people to care for our children, we also then we're not having enough children because of our terrible economic policy in this state, which we haven't even touched on because it's beyond the scope of the discussion. Employers are leaving. When employers leave, they not only take jobs and tax dollars to pay child care workers more, but they take working age people and their children, who we are going to be in desperate need of, as we are one of the only demographic in our state that's growing is the over 80 demographic. Elena, a very quick yes or no question, please. Are parents too dumb to figure out where their children should go for care and for preschool? Are parents too dumb to figure that out on their own, or do they need the government to tell them how to do it? Just yes or no. Are they too dumb to do it?
They are not too dumb. They
Okay.
usually can figure it out.
Thank you. I looked up your facility on Facebook, and I see you got 100% recommended, 6 out of 6 reviews. Yes or no, can I put a post on Facebook and say, anybody out there want to tell me about New Beginnings Enhanced Learning Center? Can I do that?
Yep.
If I ask you for referrals as to who used your facility, will you give me 2 or 3 referrals? And if you don't, should I maybe be concerned about that?
Correct.
Is there a site called Yelp that gives you ratings on 1 to 5 stars?
I don't know if we're on Yelp.
But rest assured, one of the other sites was. So I would suggest anybody from DHS that's watching, parents don't really need your help. It's kind of like the IRS coming into a business and saying, I'm from the IRS and I'm here to help. What we need government to do is have some base standards for a newly open facility, know what the playbook and the game the rules of the game are, and then they should focus on exception management. Am I also correct that a parent who is unhappy with your facility is able to put a post on Facebook or Yelp, or to call DHS and say, we have a problem because it's 150 degrees in the basement?
Correct.
Right?
They can make complaints.
Okay.
Yep.
Am I also correct that parents who have these same children at home are subject to no such requirements?
Correct.
Okay. Yet we don't seem to see children dying, falling over dead because of lack of circulation or excessive heat or playing on grass. Lastly, one of the things here at the state, thank goodness, we can't print money unlike the federal government. So whenever we say we need more money for child care or elder care or dementia research, many, many good things that we should be helping with, we got to say, well, where does that money come from? I want to tell you that I hear employer after employer, just like we did today, say we need more welders, we need more machinists, we need more carpenters, we need more child care workers, we need more health care workers. I rarely hear them say we need more college graduates, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. Yet, not only do we have a $600 million state university network where enrollment continues to decline, but I would say the first place we look is the $600 million that we give to Pitt, Penn State, and Temple for higher education, schools that have a combined $10 billion endowments, where 47% of the children that we send to college have no degree at all in 6 years. They have done nothing but largely waste time and money. All the while, a 16-year-old can drive an automobile at 80 miles an hour around the Baltimore Beltway in rush hour traffic, but they somehow are not allowed to care for children. I believe exactly what they are doing at Southwestern. Is that right, Ms. Stremmel? Have you had any children die under their care or need to be rushed to the ER? Okay.
No.
So to put it in perspective, and I will end with this, Mr. Chair, we give Pitt, Penn State, and Temple $600 million. And there's a lot of other money out there, welfare fraud, grown able-bodied men with no dependents getting paid to not work. But let's just pick on Pitt, Penn State, and Temple. private universities for all intents and purposes. $600 million, listen to this please if you hear nothing else. 46,000 child care workers in Pennsylvania. That sound about right? That's what Google says. At $600 million that we're throwing at these universities, that would be a $13,000 a year pay raise for every child care worker in Pennsylvania. So let's just cut it by 40%. Let's take $230 million out of that nonsensical bloated budget that we send to these universities with no accountability. That would be a $5,000 a year child care raise for every child care worker. So my final question is, yes or no, if you could pay your employees $5,000 a year per more, do you think it would be easier to recruit and retain them?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Representative Pugh.
Thank you, Chairman, and I am not sure how to follow up with that one. Very well done. Having been a president of a chamber myself, I understand, the businesses and the workforces, and owning a business myself for 34 years, the difficulties that actually happen. Have you guys done any surveys, or do you know of any surveys that the chamber has done with small businesses in particular of what the top 3 issues are? And Commissioner Wheeler, you seem to be all over the place with York County and getting things done, so I truly appreciate that. Have you, in any of the surveys that you've done, what the top 3 issues are from the small businesses?
So workforce, number one, finding employees, qualified employees, that consistently ranks as the top issue. Having recently had a conversation with developers in our area, I have to tell you, the regulations around housing developments and putting new developments in, we like to talk about how this is a little bit off of the base here a little bit, but just we've got a captive audience. It costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of regulations that go into building new homes, and we all like to talk about how we want to make the American dream more accessible. Well, when the state of Pennsylvania is putting up regulation after regulation, making it more difficult to own a home, to own a property, that's a problem. So just passing that on as well. Commissioner, do you have anything you want to add to that?
So based on our data, it is the #1 reason for workplace absenteeism is a lack of childcare. So that's backed by data. Happy to share that with you at a later time. I would also like to make a couple points. One thing we haven't talked about is the issue of families who find themselves homeless in our community. I wanted to segue onto something that Sarah had mentioned. The Children's Aid Society in York, which is a nonprofit organization, they serve homeless families with children. Last year, they served 209 children, providing close to 39,000 hours between childcare and childhood education. The nonprofits are a piece of the puzzle, but I would ask you to be mindful that that's something you should also take a look at, is how do we serve that population? Because we know things happen and folks find themselves in a difficult situation with kiddos. To follow up to Representative Glime's question, so when we look at York County, we invested $3.5 million that created space for 1,800 children. That's just under $1,950 per child. I would call that a pretty darn good return on investment. So as you look at numbers, I think that's pretty outstanding. I'll put my business cap on, just like Representative Pugh. It's also, we heard some discussion in the other panel. From my perspective, this is not about home-based versus center-based care. It's about offering options to families so families can make a choice of what is most appropriate for them and their children. And regarding, there were some questions on the Keystone Stars program. Quality is important, absolutely, but the metrics have to be thoughtful, they have to be relevant, and they have to be driven by data. We can't just arbitrarily put metrics in place if it's not backed by data. So those are a few final thoughts from my end.
I appreciate, thank you. And you had to go down the regulation thing for building, didn't you?
Well, it's,
Get
regulations.
the chairman going here now.
Regulations in general, I think we continue to hear that year after year from, it's across business sectors, that it continues to be a problem in Pennsylvania.
Okay, I appreciate that. And accessibility really is an issue. I have a daughter right now that's trying to find some place for her 2 young boys to go so she can continue to go to work and her husband can continue to go to work. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pugh. We tend to find, as we're traveling, we find recurring themes. And so talking about the issue of housing, Representative Schlegel has been an advocate for those common sense reforms. We'll be up in Representative Olsmer's district talking about this as well. So it's definitely more to come on that issue. I'm going to turn things over now to Chairwoman Klunk for any questions she has and some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our second panel for joining us here today. A question for Elena. So you've gone on to, you're in the process of receiving your bachelor's degree. Would there be a pathway for you to not receive your bachelor's degree and still take over your mother's daycare? Or do you have to receive a bachelor's
It doesn't
degree?
have to be a bachelor's degree in education, but you have to have a higher level of education in order to be a director. Not an owner, but a director, and my plan is to be both, so therefore I have to have something.
So in your experience and your mom's experience, are there people out there who just have maybe 20 years of experience, or, you know, a grandma, a mom, who, you know, could very well maybe manage a classroom and come in the door, and you cannot offer them upward mobility because they don't have a bachelor's degree because of the regulations?
We have an employee like that cannot be considered a group supervisor even though she's worked 25 years in childcare. She cannot be considered a group supervisor because there's an application you can put in, and we put said application in, and she was denied because she does not have any higher education.
And that's why we are ranked by the Archbridge Institute 48th in the country when it comes to our education and our regulatory environment. We are failing our centers, we're failing our parents, we're failing our kids because of these regulations. Look, my kids, I want somebody who loves them, who cares for them, who holds them and, you know, thinks that they're the world at that moment. And that's probably that woman who's been there for 20 some years. I don't care if she has a bachelor's degree. I care that she loves my kid. So to the DHS folks listening, please, let's take a look at these regulations, because I think there's a way that we can make sure that that woman who works for you has upward mobility, and gives these people who are doing the Lord's work options to grow and earn more.
She is retiring next year because she cannot advance.
And that breaks my heart for her and the children who she could care for. So, to our economic side of the panel over here, I want to say, Chairwoman Wheeler, thank you. Thank you for chairing our Board of Commissioners and leading us in a path forward with partnership with our employers, with our philanthropic community, and showing that York County cares for our kids. The ECHO program that we have here in York County is absolutely outstanding. It is a model for the state. It shows where everyone is there supporting that child, supporting that family. We're all parts of that stool. And you guys, I think, do that better than anyone else here in the state. I do think the dollars that you're driving out and trying to be very strategic with those individual grants, with helping small business owners and making sure that we have this mix. You're helping the small business owners, you're helping the big, the bigger YMCAs and everything in between. And that goes back to that choice, right, for our families. Childcare is not one size fits all here in Pennsylvania. Just like school choice, we need to have childcare choice. And when we have regulations that don't match that choice for our families, that stifle that opportunity for women, small business owners, we're not helping anyone. So I really hope our folks, back at DHS are listening to this conversation, like I know that they are. But I wanted to ask Jake about the employer child care contribution tax credit. And maybe even Cynthia too. How is that helping our employers, provide an additional support for their employees to show, hey, we're committed to supporting you and your family, and what other tax credits are you guys, hearing that your businesses are using, and maybe that UTS is using, EITC, anything like that, that may or may not, and Cynthia, you might not know because of you're just, in HR, but maybe Jake can speak to that more broadly here in the local community. Are those tax credit programs helping our businesses keep folks and also supporting our providers.
I think so, absolutely. You mentioned EITC specifically. The amount of times I hear that when going out and talking to members of our business community, I think that's a key policy, and can be expanded on, in my opinion. I think any policy, any tax credit that you roll out, just keeping in mind business in general, the challenges that they're facing, ways that you can support them. That would be what I would push out to you. Anything that can be used to just make it easier to train and attract employees, things like that. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
Well, thank you so very much to the panel, the second panel here today. It's just so great to see that we have workforce opportunities for our young folks. We're trying to attack the workforce side, supporting our providers and the business and government entities that are working to support everyone in this process. Thank you so much for being a part of the discussion. We look forward to continuing this discussion, Mr. Chairman. I know we have additional hearings planned moving forward here in the coming weeks and months, but providers who are listening, please reach out to us. Let us know what your concerns are. Invite one of us to come and tour your facility. It's not just about reading the book. It's going when you get the call, like I did with New Beginnings, that the inspector was there to just see what that process is look like from the provider point of view. It was truly eye-opening, and I look forward to continuing the conversations as we move forward, because our kids here in Pennsylvania and our families deserve it.
Thank you, Chair Klunk. I want to echo Chairwoman Klunk's gratefulness to both of our panels for being here. I know it's quite a time commitment, but Harrisburg can definitely become a bit of a bubble sometimes as we're focused on 1,000 different issues and going into a complicated budget season. So hearing directly from you guys, the boots on the ground, the folks in the arena, that's what gives us the insight to go back to Harrisburg to advocate for common sense changes to make your guys' lives easier as you provide these pivotal services to families in the Commonwealth. I think we've learned today that childcare is central to the affordability conversation and really is the backbone to the strength of our workforce. And it's going to remain a priority for this committee. I know it's going to remain a priority for Chairwoman Klunk, myself, and many of the members here. So we look forward to continuing this work, advancing solutions going forward. I want to thank the members for taking the time to be here today. We're going to continue this conversation moving forward. Until then, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.